Okay, good. Okay, we're up to Siman Lamed Beis, Sif Lamed Tes. Now this Sif is talking about the squareness of Tefillin. How square do your Tefillin have to be? So says the Mechaber, Tefillin, Bein Shel Rosh, Bein Shel Yad, Haloch L'Moshe Mesinai Sheyu Murubois, that the Tefillin Shel Yad and the Tefillin Shel Rosh have got to be square, B'Tifron Uba'al Kaseinon, on the not only the actual shape of the box, but in the stitching of it, and in the diagonals, which we'll explain. Tahainu sheyu ribuan mechuven arkei kerachboi, that the length should be the same as the width. Kadei she'elem oisa alachsen, that they should have the same triangle, the diagonal. So what does that mean? So here we go.
Same size.
Same, yeah. In other words, so you've got a tefillin here. This is a shel yad. So, if you've got we'll talk about what needs to be square soon, but just take the bottom over here, right? So you've got the bottom, the stitching, this is the stitching at the top over here, and the stitching underneath has got to be totally square, and the sides have got to be equal, therefore, because in order that the elachson, the diagonal, is equal, we know that if this is 1, just mathematically, and this is 1, then this is going to be 1.4, right? It's not exact. You're a mathematician. So what's the mathematical formula? Root 2. In other words, the sum of that side and that side, the square of that side and that side, is the sum of the square of that side. So that diagonal is the root is root 2 if that's 1 and 1. So which is approximately 1.4. Tosfos in Sukkah notes that it's a 50th out, right? 1.41 or whatever. It's Tosfos in Sukkah, we'll get to it, which actually has halachic bearing, but we'll see more in Mitzvah Shem as we proceed. Okay, so that's what the Mechaber means, that it's got to be square. There's got to be the length and the width equal, that they should have the same diagonal. Because Chazal say, when you have an amma, which is an amma on each side, on the length and the width, then the diagonal is going to be 1.4. It's going to be 1.4 on the diagonal. You've got to square off the setting place of it. V'gama batim. So let's do the Mishnah Berurah, and then we'll explain what the various details in the picture book and the show and tell is going to help us out. So says the Mishnah Berurah, Sheyu Merubois. Ve'im lo yasum merubois. It's a very serious halacha. This ve'im lo yasum merubois ma'akev b'diavad. If the tefillin not square, then it's going to be ma'akev even b'diavad. That is the Rambam in Perek Gimel Mehilchas Tefillin Ein Sham. U'mikol makom im ein lo tefillin acherim. If he hasn't got any other tefillin, Yanichem leis atza beloy bracha. He puts them on now without a bracha. And when he later gets some properly square tefillin, then you put them on. Now take a look at 210, then the footnote addition note. Why is he put on without a bracha? So he quotes the Yeshuas Yaakov Shu Kadesh Lo Tishtakach Teiras Tefillin. The mice of these tefillin, we said that even b'diavad they're ma'akev. So why are you putting on posel tefillin? The teretz is that you shouldn't forget the concept of tefillin. And we find a similar thing with lulav. Yeah, exactly. So he says that. In Tov Reish Mem Tes, in Mitzvah Hashem, we'll get there. Shemisha ein le arba minim kasherim. If a person hasn't got kosher arba minim, yikach psulim. Unbelievable. So you take your kids one from Toys R Us or from wherever, and you this plastic tefillin or the plastic arba minim, and walk around shul with that. Why? Etc. And he says, look at the Ber Halacha. The Ber Halacha discusses whether you should make a bracha, and the Mishnah Berurah question is maybe you should make a bracha, and he says, okay, we're not to make a bracha like the Yeshuas Yaakov, but that's the diun in the Mishnah Berurah in the Ber Halacha. Okay, continuing the Mishnah Berurah, Kufa and Dalet sheyiyu rubuon. They should be properly square. Shel hatfiras, the tefirah should be square. So you see here, can you see these stitchings are properly square, right? That's what he's referring to. The stitchings have got to be properly square. In other words, we'll see soon that you're excluding this part. the bridge, the mabaratan, you'll see that this is what he's talking about. So the stitching has got to be properly square. Kufayin Dalet shel hatfiras. V'nearly poshet the tzarich lios hatfiras meruba bein lemala bein memata. Both the ones at the top and at the bottom, like I said before, the upper stitching and the inner stitching. V'after lo brurali inyan di'evid. And even though I'm not entirely clear if b'di'evid the stitching both of the upper and the lower one is if it's not square, certainly lechatchila you've got to make sure that the stitching at the surface and underneath are properly square. Kuf ayin hey. So we said kadei sheyeh pirush v'ribu gomor. It should be properly square. She'arkai kerachbay. That the length and the breadth mamish shir chacham kol hashish yesh lo yesh. Sorry, I've jumped. V'ribu gomor she'arkai kerachbay mamish. That the length and the width should be identical. Shir chachamim. The chachamim have estimated kol hashir sheyesh lo ba'alachsain base chamoshim noisav al oisa hashir. Like I said, that if this is 1 and this is 1, then the alachsain, the diagonal, is going to be 1.4. V'gam kan tzorich shemur b'mamish, avelim lo hayu mur b'mamish, lo yabalachsain shaloi kashir beis chamoshim tesefes el shir acher. And because if this is 1 and this is 1.2, for example, this is longer, it goes across more, then your diagonal is not going to be 1.4. That's what it means. וגם כן צורך שיהיה מור ממש, אבל אם לא יהיה מור ממש, לא יהיה בלחסן שלו כשיר בייס חמושים תוספת לשיר אחר. ועל כן, ימדדנו בארבעה קווים, you've got to measure, to measure it on the 4 lines, וידע אם הוא מרובה. דהיינו תחילה ימדד קו אחד בערך וקו אחד ברוחב, שיהיה שווה. You've got to measure the length and the breadth to make sure that they're identical. Ach, shema be'emtso shava uv'stad of mismayet. Now you've got to be careful, because, in fact, you've got a picture which makes it very clear here. If you look in the Ta'er Halacha, Eli, if you look at page 185, you'll see the pictures there, but I'll show it to you here. Imagine you measure, you get your tape measure, or you get your ruler, and you measure across there and you get 1. And you measure there and you get 1. Perfect, right? Or you just, you measure, let's say there, across there 1, and you measure across there 1. Well, it could be at that point, it's square, but it's not foolproof, because it could be that it goes in, it's like an angle, it goes, here, it shows it here. Here, can you see picture hey? The stitching is actually not a proper square. Can you see? And therefore, if that's not a proper square, it turns out that one of the sides is going to be longer, and your diagonal is actually not going to be 1.4. So he says measure it carefully. Don't just measure it at one point, there and there, because at that point it could actually work out. But you've got to make sure it's uniform and that it's properly square throughout. ועל כן ימדנו בארבעה קווים וידעים הוא מרובה, דהיינו תחילה ימדד קו אחד בערך וקו אחד ברוחב שיהיה שווה, אך שמה שבאמצעו שווה וסוד of mismine, maybe it gets narrower on the sides, לכן ימדנו עוד בשני קווים באלכסונוי, then measure it again a second time, שיהיו שווים שני קווי אלכסון, גם כן that make sure that the אלכסון is going to be properly 1.4 like we said. Okay, צורך לרבע. So this is going on, שאמרו חז"ל, you've got to make sure that the place, the moshav, the place of the setting is properly square. What does that mean? V'ayin kufayin vov v'tzorich l'rabeh v'gam zeh hu me'aloch al Moshe misinai kufayin vov l'das reiv haposkim v'gam zeh hu beribua gomor k'mei batfira. That's also the just like the tefillah has got to be square, the setting place has also got to be square. V'aft meruba mamish b'melech sabatim, even though the squareness in the batim, it should be perfectly square. Hukimat min nimna. How square is square? How accurate you have to be. Whatever you can possibly do, you should do to make it as square as possible. And that's why I said to you yesterday that Osher Badil, my Rabbi in high school, used to always say, the Moshe Rabbeinu, he took me in year 8, the old year 2. mitzvah year. So that was when everyone was into the tefillin, and that was the focus. And he would say that Moshe Rabbeinu would dance with joy if he saw out tefillin, because the squareness, I guess, with modern machinery is much easier to achieve. Now he says a very interesting note in number 211. He quotes from Moshe, Omnon. Kosev b'shayla zeshuvas igros Moshe she'ein tzarich limdod b'kli medida. You don't have to get your, I don't know what the word is, but your sort of your precision, your manufacturer's precision tape measure, she'mechuvan arka karach ve'mamish, that it's exactly. Ela kol she'atzimtzem v'digdei k'fi yecholta. So long as you do it to the best of your ability and you make it as square as you possibly can, l'rava nir le'ein shehu meruba, and people look at it and say, yes, that looks square. Harihu kasha. That is sufficient, says Ramosha. And that's also the same. He's brought in the Urchas Rabbeinu, which is the Chaznish, and the Stipler. Okay. Now then he quotes very interestingly the Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Vagan Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Kosav in Halichas Shlomo. The Mehad Kaimlan Shekol Amta Berevua Hariu Amta V'Trei Chumshi Ba'al. We've said all along that the diagonal is going to be 1.4. When you've got a side of 1 and 1, that the diagonal is going to be 1.4. Afal gav she'ein hacheshbon meduyek, even though mathematically that is not absolutely accurate. For chose echod michamishim, it's approximately out by 1/50th. Yeah, Mikey, you'll have to, I don't know, do the maths properly, but it's so. So root 2 is 1.41 or whatever it is exactly, but it's the Tosfos there, or Kamoshe Kosu Tosfos in Sukkah Ches Amud Aleph, Divrei Maskil Kol. So therefore he gives a bit of leeway of 1/50th. So therefore, so long as you try your best, Shapidomi, that would be sufficient. And says Rabbi Shlomo Zalman, an error of a margin of error of 1/50th. Okay, good. Kuf Ayin Zayin Meishavon. Now, if you here, let me just show you what that means. Meishavon, Eli, this is on page 108. Yeah, sorry, 106, 186 at the bottom. 186, Meishavon. This is talking about the base. And now the Meishavon is this bit, right? He's not including that. So in other words, it doesn't have to be square from there, right? It's just this Mokum Meishav. That's what he's referring to. It says in the Mishnah Berurah, V'hu hatitayra. That is the Tatayra, the Hainu. Sheyachtei chamabarta mishnei tzodim. You've got to cut out. Imagine when the sofer makes the tefillin, this is squared off. This incision, when he cuts out that little bit over there, happens afterwards. So make sure, says the Mishnah Berurah, that he's cut out that little bit over there and cut out that bit, that your squareness is measured from there and not including this bit over here. Okay, that's what it means. So it says the Mishnah Berurah, Meishavon v'hu hatitayra, the Hainu sheyachtei chama'abarta. The ma'abarta is this bit. Is this the bridge, right? This bridge where the Ritzuas go through, that's the ma'abarta. So it says the Mishnah Berurah, sheyachtei chama'abarta. He cuts the ma'abarta mishnei tzadov kadesh yenika ribuah hatitayra. So like I said, you cut off this little bit over here, and that way the ribuah is this square bit over there. You've got to be very careful with this. If you haven't got it properly square, then like you said earlier, then this is all. Then this ma'akev. And you've also got to be careful with the stitching. When the sofrim stitch it, they do holes which are slightly large. Then sometimes the chut can go to the side. Then it means the stitching is not going to be square. This will go in and this will go out. So I'll tell you what he means. Can you see these little holes? How does it work? He's got this leather piece of bias, and he drills holes into the base. Now, if he drills larger holes, the stitching, the thread which is going to go through, sometimes it could go to the one side of the large hole, and then the next bit on the next section, it could go to the next bit. So that means it's actually not flush, because if he's got very large holes, the threading will go on one side like that, and then on this, and it'll go into the hole, and then maybe go like that side on the next side. So the sofer's got to be quite careful how to do the holes and how to do the stitching. And it won't be aligned. It's got to be square, both on the stitching at the top which is the visible part, and the stitching underneath. And now, due to our many sins, people don't take proper care over their tefillin, that they're square as they should be. Even those who are very careful normally about mitzvahs, that they're particular about the top of the batim, i.e. this part, they're worried about this part, that this is all square, but actually there's this part also has got to be properly square. So, and they're not worried about the base, the underside of the tefillin, and the stitching of it. And it's very easy to fix it, so one has to be aware of that. So the Mechaber carried on that also the bottom got to be square. There are some people who say, well, at the base, that's where it's got to be square, but at the top, if it's rounded off a little bit, not the end of the world. But both the shalyad and the shalrosh have got to be properly square. When it says that the shalrosh has got to be square, that means when the four sections have got to be square. So what he means by that is this. Sorry to undo all your tefillin, Chaim. Thank you for this. Here's your shell rosh. So we know the shell rosh is made up of four compartments. You can see the distinctions here, right? So don't think that each of these four sections have got to be ribua, has got to be square, because then you're going to have very, very tiny tefillin. Yeah, in fact, he's got a picture of it, of what it would look like. It looks a bit strange. Here, can you see this? If it meant that each of the four sections have got to be square, you're going to end up with something like that. That's what your tefillin would look like. Each of the four sections will be square. So says the Mishnah Berurah, no, what he means is that all four of them, when they're stuck together, that's what it means. That's square, not the individual boxes. Yeah, you see that? So it says the Mishnah Berurah, the Delok Meshon in Ksas Lasus in Kufayin Ches, together, all four sections as one unit should be square. That's not each of the four sections. It's got to be the whole height, not just square at the bottom, at the base of the tefillin, but throughout the height. Now that's important, because imagine you get a knock, imagine you get some sort of chip there. You can't just take some glue or some stuffing or material to square it off. The actual bias, the actual leather, has got to be square. Okay, niskalkel ribuan. So let's carry on. Let's carry on the remote. We haven't done this yet. Al goiva habatim, with regard to the height of the batim, ein lahakbidim hu yosim mirachman va'arkon. Don't worry if the height is a little bit taller than the width and the length and the width of the tefillin. That's the remote. Now continues the Mechaber. There's no Mishnah Berurah on that. Asom merubois. What happens if you make your tefillin square? I'm in the Mechaber in the second line. Also merubos, you make your tefillin square. And with time, niskalkel ribuon, they become less square. They sort of round off a bit. There are those who say you should square them off. It says the Ramah, v'yase kol haba batim b'shava, and all four batim should be equal. V'loji he echad gadol mechavere, and not one bigger than the other one. Okay, I'll come back to that in a second. So it says the Mishnah Berurah in Kuf Ayin Tes, niskalkel ribuon, kagoin, shenisakmu habatim. The batim have sort of deteriorated, they've bent a little bit. Zepoin lemizrach v'zelemarav, one goes one way, one goes the other way. Oisheniskalkel chudi habatim, or legamre at shenase ogol, or the corners, which is you sometimes see. They're rounded off. They're not sharp and pointy in the corners. They've become rounded off. There's some problem that they're not square anymore. No one argues with this. When he says yesh mishom, no one's actually arguing. but that's a sort of a stylistic way of writing. Kuf Pei Aleph, Shetzorach l'Rabban, you've got to square it off. To kiven de ribun halachal mishmisinai. Since the squareness of the tefillin is a halachal mishmisinai, bechol shaita boin and shimur boin, the whole time they need to be square. Umikol mokum ein tzorich lemodadam b'kol yom im ribun kayom. You don't have to